Laila. Dr. Laila was talking about a set of countries who are regarded as big economies in the digital field, like, for example, the USA, Brazil, Colombia, India. All of these countries resisted the OECD establishment, establishment of the first pillar of the OECD. And this is maybe something to be questioned, I mean, to ask questions about. So, away from the theories and theoretical thinking about the revenue, the tax revenues, let's talk about or think about the non-participation of these countries, or having these countries not joining the first pillar. Maybe this would make this first pillar as inefficient, really. And here I have to move to Mrs. Khaoula Yahiaoui, and maybe she is going to try to answer this question, and she will also present or give us a set of the achievements and the experiences they or the countries around the world experienced when it comes to the application of the digital economy taxes. She will also share her point of view when it comes to the best interests of these countries. How can we imagine a better economy for these countries? Khawla, the floor is yours. Thank you, Sahar. Just if you give me 1 second so that I can use my equipment. Can you all see my screen? Yes, we can. I'd like to welcome all of you in this webinar about the problems, the tax problems resulting from the movement towards the digital economy. And it is a topic that comes under the umbrella of the challenges, the international challenges for the digital economies, especially for the multinational enterprises working in digital field. I'm going to tackle this topic by presenting the main challenges for the traditional taxation system, and I'm going to give an idea about the solutions, the potential solutions at the international level and at the national level also. We are going not only to provide a distinguishing point of view about what is the best one to adopt, but also to evaluate and assess these economies and these experiences around the world. In the beginning, I'd like to talk about the revolution, digital revolution that radically changed the way we do our businesses around the world. And it is important actually to identify these concepts when it comes to the digital revolution, so that we do not lie or tie it only to the AI, artificial intelligence, or any kind of digital service. So we have to identify this term because it is a new term. So this digital economy is is different than the conventional economy to make wealth. The conventional one was used or relied especially on the handcrafts and on the conventional, or let's say traditional way of drafting or designing to economy relying on oil, for example. Now we are talking about digital revolution, and of course we have different examples when it comes to the differences between the digital economy and the technological economy versus the conventional and the traditional one. Let's say, for example, the one of the companies is called GAFAM, and it is one of the revolutionary enterprises or companies that is using the non-tangible assets, like, for example, the copyrights and the data. This example is a real challenge to the tax rules and tax systems in the world, because um, it or those tax rules uses the headquarters, the main office of the company. So this is what we have been used to. And now the question that I think we have to ask first is the model of the business of these digital companies so that we can design an effective tax or tax system around it. So as for these companies, the digital companies, I mean, they rely on different models and they are different from the conventional models. I wanted to divide them into categories. So we have the platform companies like Airbnb, Uber, also. These platforms, they link between the service providers and the service users without having without owning an asset like a traditional asset. The second category is the digital content companies like YouTube, Netflix, and TikTok. For these companies, I think that Mrs. Latifa or Dr. Latifa gave information and data about to what extent the users are creators of the work to these digital content companies. So the revenues are huge for these companies. The third company is the digital ad company, like for example Google and Facebook, knowing that a company can belong to different fields at the same time. So these companies, they mainly rely on ads as a main revenue or income source. The coming category is the trade, electronic trade companies like Amazon. It is a platform to buy and sell things on the internet. And in general, all of these companies, they make taxes on them very complicated because the revenues are not are not related to tangible money in the countries where they operate. So these different companies now, they prove that they are very much let's say creative. They can collect money and collect revenues unless or they are not related at all to the normal and traditional, less conventional ways to create revenues. Example on that is the webinar that we are now having today. It is something that makes us think about the difference or how to apply such kind of previously designed tax rules on newly created and creative companies. We have this challenge that leads us to the main question, which is how can the tax rules or the tax system deal with these new categories of companies? In relation to the services, it was important to, or it is important to make the difference between the electronic services, like, for example, ads, platforms, and so on, and the technical services, the daily technical services, the administrative ones, the consultative ones, and that the UN mentioned them in its Article 12, saying that they were excluded, the mediation ads and all of that, they were excluded from the services, the technical services, I mean. So the main problem, as we said, that is in front of these traditional systems of taxes is the territorial field in the global tax systems, because in general how are taxes calculated? They are calculated according to the revenues. However, when it comes to the let's say digital companies, we have our company that rely on digital services. They do not have offices. They do not have a revenue that they collect on one country. And I was talking to Mrs. Nabil Alweti, or Habib Alweti, sorry, and she said that because she's more experienced in Tunisia, So we were talking about the company that sell the data, and of course, I have to remind you that the data are related to the people, the users of technology, and we call them consumers or users. So according to or upon these data, the company can make a lot of revenues without any tangible existence. And this is, of course, something that makes a difference between a technical or a technological company that relies on technology and they cannot be controlled, and versus, of course, the traditional or conventional companies where their revenues are calculated and where we can impose any kind of tax system. So we deduct that. Now, our companies or our countries are unable to calculate and to impose these taxes on specific categories of companies. These companies, they rely solely on non-tangible assets, and the problem for our tax systems, is that they rely mainly on the tangible assets and the revenues, I mean the money. And of course, I'm going to give more details on that later on, because I personally think that we have not to think of of amending or adjusting these rules or systems, but we have to create new ones. These digital companies, they have to find no tax havens so that they find themselves obliged to pay the taxes as the conventional companies do. And this is, of course, to have or to establish kind of justice between the digital and the non-digital companies or traditional companies. It is important to talk about the non-tangible or the tangible versus the virtual presence of these companies. So now we have companies, oh, sorry, countries that have oversight institutions. They were looking for different solutions, multilateral solutions, bilateral solutions, or unilateral solutions in order to solve this problem. So at the international level, one of the solutions was the European Union Commission's initiative on a unified system of tax on the digital companies, and it is well known as AXI. And this is a project that the European Union drafted, and it was aimed at enhancing the tax rules between the or among the European country members, I mean the EU members. And of course, they have to be drafted according to the policy, the tax policy that is adopted by every and each country separately. And this doesn't go in line with the unified kind of tax that is applied only on the traditional companies. The Commission also suggested another type of tax, which is GAFA tax. It is a tax on the digital services that target the big companies in this field. And this initiative is based on the guarantee that the digital companies provide their amount or their share of of the tax of that company. Of course, many of the European countries were agreed to that initiative. In France, for example, it was agreed on 3%, and in other countries, the percentage is different. Some other countries also, all of these countries, of course, are signatories to the first pillar of the OECD, and this is in order to put an end to withholding taxes. Now, let's talk about the other initiatives. We have the OECD initiative in coordination with G20. Uh, Back then, they were only 19 countries. That was in 2013. And the project was 15 activities in order to put an end to the BEPS or the base erosion and profit problem. So the problem here that they were, or sorry, the solution here is that they were talking about the profit sharing of the high tax companies to other countries where the taxation is null maybe, or is very much low, and the company, sorry, here I'm referring to the organization, the OECD, tried to solve some of the challenges in relation to taxation versus, of course, digital field, the digital field or the digital companies. And this is through creating a new concept, which is the PE, the permanent enterprise. This is because, of course, the absence of the physical existence of the company. And after the consultation, the public consultation they had, consultancy they had between the different countries and between the different sectors, we had two new solutions, which is a solution based on the two pillars. And Dr. Latifa mentioned these two pillars. What we are focusing on is the first pillar now, of course, because Tunisia was one of the partners to this OECD organization. And the first procedure of this plan suggests the concept of the digital existence, physical or tangible physical existence, digital existence. And this is based on the digital services or activities this company is delivering, especially even if the company does not have any physical existence or tangible existence in that country or in those countries. So this was regarded as a solution to was a tangible solution, or maybe was a potential solution for the countries. We had an experience in France where there was a complaint filed to the court, and that is also the procedure number 7 of the plan that suggests the extension of the PE in order to include the independent companies or agencies under the same umbrella of one company. And according to this procedure, some or these activities could get or could be under the umbrella of the taxes on the PE. So all of these initiatives and projects, they are multilateral initiatives. We have mentioned, or I mentioned them in the beginning of my presentation, so that I give you the history of trying to tailor specific solutions towards or for the problem of digital existence and digital companies and digital services. So these are the first, uh, first, let's say, initiatives. Now let's move to the governmental initiatives. So in addition to the international initiatives, we have plenty of countries or states that try to solve the problem on their own. And this was through three procedures or tools. The first thing is taxation on the digital transactions. And here, of course, we are talking about a new model of taxation, because there were taxes on the transfers between company A and company 2. Kenya, for example, is a government that imposed taxes on the digital ads. So this was regarded as a solution from the country Kenya in order to facilitate receiving more minimum of revenues. We have also another procedure, or the second procedure was imposing taxes on digital services. And Dr. Latifa said a lot about that, about the percentage. They that vary from 2% and 10%. They even reached 10%. In Turkey, it is 7.5%, France 3%. So these, let's say, taxes on the digital services are an effective solution in order to get some of the revenues that were needed for the taxation tax base, like, for example, the services on iCloud, the or the iCloud services. And they were, of course, they had a specific threshold. It was to a certain extent a just or an equitable means. Now, the last one is the imposition of or introduction of taxes on the digital services. Most of the countries adopted this one, like for example, Ecuador, Pakistan, Canada, and other countries. All of these countries, they were trying or looking for new opportunities to recognize an economy that did not or that was not even talked about before the European Commission or European Commission's initiative, which is the digital economy. Since 2015, we've been struggling to provide solutions and think about of out of the box solutions about these digital companies providing digital services. So even if you are a company or you operate in a company that does not have a tangible or physical existence on a soil of a country, they have or you have to pay a certain tax. And this is according to the system that is adopted there. And now I'm going back to the example or the model Mrs. Dr. Latifa mentioned, which is the users of Facebook in Tunisia, for example. So the company should or can have the right, or the company, sorry, the government has the right to impose a taxation on that company, even if it does not reside, sorry, in the soil of Tunisia. So these are the type of initiatives or the type of solutions that the government, the different states provided internally in order to bridge the gap between the traditional system of taxation and the new digital systems and economies. Now, before moving to assessment and evaluation, when we talk about these solutions, they were they were only solutions to face those challenges, and at the same time they were only a trial or an attempt just to overcome these challenges. Of course, they are not 100% successful. You know, these solutions seem to be promising, and many experts chose some solutions over others. But even the application of these solutions is something that comes with a lot of challenges. For example, we have a problem with the identification of the revenues on which you can calculate, of course, the taxes. Now, we are talking about a more complex complex systems in order to calculate those those taxes. And this, of course, reflects the need to have an international cooperation for such kind of problems. And maybe these kind of problems have to be faced with the serious way from or a serious solutions and initiatives by the government in order to identify, first of all, the solution, the problem and the solution, because we have now companies that belong to the third category, which is a newly enacted ones. When we talk about the first pillar, for example, we always ask ourselves, where are we in this pillar? OECD actually issued lots of reports since 2013 and gave the date of 30th of June 2024 in order to identify the number of the members joining this convention and the companies that agree to the two pillars. And since June 2024, they did not mention, they did not issue any new report, and they their job is now pending, and we're still unable to know the number of the members of these of this convention and the people or the company, the governments and the states who really want to find a solution for the digital economies. Another part of aspect of the solution, maybe I have to say before that some of the governments try to solve the problem internally without going into the international cooperation because they wanted to be flexible in the application and so on. However, at the same time, this leads to other problems, which is the tax conflicts between the states, because some companies will have dual or double standards for the taxation, and of course this is not acceptable for these companies. That's why the solutions, the multinational solutions, or sorry, multilateral solutions, is something that we really are looking for in order to avoid these conflicts. And at the end, I have to say that the current taxation system, global taxation system, is something that needs to be reformed, a huge reform actually, because we have a new category that has been introduced to the economy, which is digital service and digital economies. These topics are should be the essence of the discussions for the taxation system in the global taxation system in the future. But I have to tell you that the world is very swift and fast in changing. So are we going to spend all of this time every time a new category or a new type of economy is introduced to us? Or can we find some article or some principles that respect the need to moving or into reacting in a prompt way? So this is for the two parts of the presentation today. And on my personal point of view, I think that we have pioneer examples in when it comes to the solutions provided, and I have the idea. So I have the example or the model of my Nigeria, and I like to hail on this experience because it was very prompt. Their reaction was very prompt, and Nigeria now uh, was a pioneer in this field, and it drafted a model, a new model based on the collection of, it is based on both, so curbing the line of taxation and at the same time imposing taxation on the digital companies. We have 10% of the technical digital services, and this is of course something that enhanced the inclusive way or inclusive concept of its economy. And because we were talking about the measures based on the physical existence, I think I have to identify that we have the profit principle and the goal and the problem. So for the profit principle, we have new tax rights broker for just jurisdiction in the market. And this is something very much important because we are talking about traditional services or transactions versus the digital ones. It is a normal and ordinary development for the economy that used to be based on the goals itself, and now it is based also on goals, however different type of goals. And because we are talking about the limits of the distribution of the taxation or dual taxation rights, so we have, for example, the limits the limits of the government to impose taxes, whether it is a residual resident state or a source state. We have, of course, the example of the international cooperation model of OECD that put, of course, instead limits on the fixed installation of the where the companies do not have physical existence. And this is, of course, a big gap because today the governments cannot get revenues or tax revenues from companies that provide digital services. And this maybe makes us go back to square zero because we are turning in the same circle, vicious cycle. And in addition to all of those challenges and the assessment we have made, of course, it is a it's a theoretical assessment. And now let's talk about the application. We're going to be faced by lots of complexities. Uh, the main complexity or the main, let's say, challenge would be the timetable or the timeline. we will have many time constraints because these companies are developed, they will develop, they are developing also. In every time they are faced with a challenge, they will provide creative ways to overcome that challenge. And in addition to that, we have some solutions that will be targeting only the big companies that whose revenues are more than $20 million. And this is, of course, something that makes us think about the future of the small companies. And here, of course, we're going to wonder about the principle of equity and justice. And then how much revenue should be allocated to the company in a question? This is, of course, one of the questions that we have to ask. And the scope of these laws extends to both physical and digital goods and services. So these are the, uh, let's say, tax bases, the separate or individual solutions, plus the multilateral solutions. And at the very end, I have to talk about the role played by the United Nations because it is very important to mention the UN. Since 2021, we had talked about the revenues of tax revenues of the digital companies within, of course, the UN. And of course, this is very much important to mention because it highlights the importance of the UN, especially that we are talking about different initiatives around the world in order to impose this digital tax. At the end of my presentation, I'd like to thank you all for your attention. And I tried only to provide an insight about the digital economy challenges and an insight also about the potential solutions. I'd like to listen from you. We try to give our opinion about the best or the thing that we think is better when it comes to these solutions, because we have a very quick changing nature of the companies, of the states, and so on. But we do not, unfortunately, have a very quick changing systems of taxation. Thank you.